Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, Fabian Electrical Services Inc. In today's video, I'm basically going to be showing you my electrical panel and also my breakers, how not to load breakers, how not to install breakers the wrong way, how to install breakers the correct way, how to use the correct size breakers for the correct wires. Basically, a electrical panel has to be loaded accordingly on each side. You cannot overload one side opposed to the other side, meaning that if I have 10 15 amp breakers, which are these 15 amp breakers, okay, I have to load my panel with enough breakers on each side. If I have a 60 amp breaker, if I have a 30 amp breaker, I have to put my breakers accordingly. Also, I would like to give a shout out to Trill. Hope you're doing fine. Shout out to One Gaza Uncle. Shout out to Real Vibe TV. Shout out to Lee. Shout out to Elijah. And let's get started with this video so you can see the work that I do on a daily basis. Okay. So basically right now what I have here is a 14, sorry, I have a 20 gauge wire. And the 20 gauge wire is basically used for a 15 amp breaker. But this right here, I'm going to be using these set of wires for two receptacles that are for the boilers, which I will be loading them at 15 amps. So I oversize my wire just in case that when these boilers do show up on the job and it happens to be a 20 amp that I need, then I will have prepped for a 20 amp instead of a 15 amp breaker. Okay, let's see. How did I do this? Okay. Hi, Haley. Okay. Also, I have my 14 gauge wire. So 14 gauge wire, I will be using 15 amps on my 14 gauge wire. You cannot use a 20 amp breaker on a 14 gauge wire. It will overheat basically, and it will cause a fire. As you can see, I always label my wires accordingly. That way, when I'm ready to install my breakers and I'm ready to label my panel, I know that I know where the destination was landed with. I know what these wires were for because I have to label the panel at the end of the job for inspection. So right here I have lights, kitchen. So basically, once I'm done with my installation, I will then take my cover. As you can see, it's not open yet, but I will take my cover and I will mark my panel accordingly. According to, hey Pepper Skull, up Pepper Skull. I will label my panel accordingly for inspection, for final inspection. So for final inspection, I need to have all my, I need to have everything labeled accordingly. If I don't have anything labeled, then I don't get my final and I will get a defect on my job. So I don't want a defect on my job, okay? As you can see, I have all my neutrals here tied in. I'll bring you guys closer. As you can see, I have all my neutral wires tied in to the neutral bar. Okay, I have my ground wires tied into my ground bar. Okay, um, these are my breakers. This is my main shut off. Okay, right now it's in the trip position. So if I was to power this up, this panel will not be live until I reset this breaker and turn it back on. So when I say reset, I mean I have to switch this breaker in the off position and turn it back on so my power will come through. This set of cable here is basically what I use. This is going to be my feeder cable, and this cable will go on the outside of this compartment. I cannot install this cable in below this compartment because it will become a hazard, and I will get a defect for that. It's a code rule. Also, if you see, I have my breakers already installed. Some breakers are special breakers, which I don't have now. So because I don't have those special breakers now, I'm just going to go ahead and use regular 15 amp breakers. That way, at the end of the job, the regular breakers are cheaper. The art fault breakers is what they're called. They're basically a breaker that will sense fire, and shut your it will shut your power down throughout the house once it detects any overcurrent in it. So for that reason, I'm not going to be installing these breakers right now, because once these guys start to come into the home and start to install the drywall and start to use heavy power tools and stuff like that, my art fault breaker will start tripping, and eventually they're going to burn that art fault breaker out, and it's going to cost me more money to reinstall that art fault breaker. So to avoid that, I will install my art fault breakers at the end of the job. Okay. Here, as you can see, I have different color wires. Okay, this is a 12 gauge wire. It's basically going to be for a 20 amp breaker. This will go on. I have a 14 gauge wire here. This 12 gauge wire is basically used for AC units, pumps, anything that will detect current. It's a thicker set of wire, so it will hold your power better. These set of wires here are also 20 gauge, 20 amp wire. It's a 12-2, it's called. Okay, you basically use these wires in the kitchen. This wire here is my dryer. It's a 10-3 wire, which I will be using for my dryer. Okay, this wire here is another 14 gauge wire. It's a different color. I don't know if you can see, but it's a different color. It's blue. It's also a 14 gauge wire. It's okay. This wire here. Okay, it's a blue wire. It's a 14 gauge wire. Up one Gaza uncle. Okay, and also this wire here is basically I'm going to be using this wire for an EV charger. Okay, it's a number 6 gauge wire. EV chargers, they draw about 48 amps, so I have to load it accordingly. I need about draws about 48 amps, so the code requires me to load this for a 60 amp breaker. And if you see here, I still have all my white wires here. They're not tied in. So basically, I'm going to be installing a couple of my wires just to let you guys see how I do my job on a daily basis. So because I don't need all of these wires, I don't need it long. I'm going to cut. I'm going to leave enough just in case I have to do I'm going to leave enough wire just in case I have to adjust or shift around a breaker, whatever I need to do. I'll still have enough wire to play with. And as you can see, I always cut my wires one by one. I never cut my wires two. Okay, when I say I cut my wires one by one, I don't take two of these wires and cut them together like that. Reason why I don't do that, it becomes a dead short. What is a dead short? A dead short is basically you're cutting a hot and you're cutting a neutral at the same time. Once you do that, then this set of wire strippers I have will blow once I cut these two wires together. So my all my time of working in the field, I've always learned to cut wires one by one to avoid the problems. Even though the panel is not live, I still practice to cut my wires one by one. It's a practice that everyone should have and should use because you cannot trust anyone. So you always depend on yourself to walk off the job at the end of the day. So for me to walk off the job at the end of the day, I will take the steps that I need to take to survive at the end of the day and go home to my family and friends and loved ones. Okay, so for that reason, I cut my wires one by one. I don't need all of these wires. It will basically create a messy panel. So I cut the length that I need and I basically will strip my wire like that. And also I never leave too much exposed wire, which is no good. So I will cut enough just to go into the breaker. Reason why I do that is because I do not want to see any copper showing once I have my breaker. Once my wires are installed and my power is on, I do not want to see any copper showing. Why is that? Because this screwdriver here is basically not protected. So once I take this screwdriver and I go to do my work here like that, okay, if this power is on, if this panel is live and I happen to slip and hit that copper, this will blow. So I do not like to show the copper, okay? Also, to avoid that, I will use insulated tools. So basically what's an insulated tool? An insulated tool is I can basically go into this panel, I can touch the copper on the side and nothing will happen to my screwdriver because it's insulated. That's the reason why I use my insulated screwdrivers. So these are called neutrals. They will go on the neutral bar. What is a neutral? A neutral is basically a wire that will give power to your circuits. Without this neutral, nothing will work. You can have your breaker on, you can have your power wire, your circuit live. But if this is not tied into your neutral bar, then your power will never be live in the house. You will never have power without this. Can one breaker control house? No. So one breaker. So for one breaker, we have for one breaker you can only go up to for receptacles, which is called plugs. You can only go to about. I like to go to about 9 devices. So when I say 9 devices, I mean 9 outlets in the house. Um, Once you start to go over that count, which is 9 devices, you start to put lights on one circuit with the plugs. You will overload the circuit, and you will start to have problems. You will start to see flickering in the house. You will start to see a lot of funny stuff. So for that reason, I will only do about eight to nine mats on the circuit. When it comes to lighting, um, there's something called wattage. So basically, every light draws about maybe the new set of lights draws about zero point 0.4 watts. So you can have maybe, let's say, 30 lights on one circuit. All depends. Okay, so yes, so one breaker can only control about eight eight devices on a circuit. Um, when it comes to your dryer is only one circuit maximum on a dryer. You cannot put two dryers on a circuit. It will blow. It's not required. It cannot do it. So basically, my dryer. These are my dryer cables, which is 30 amps. So my dryer cable will get a 30 amp breaker. I cannot put more than one. What these are? This is a two pole. So this will have two sets of breakers together. Okay. Your washer for your house, you can only have one circuit on your washer. When it comes to your kitchen now, you have your kitchen receptacles. Only one circuit per kitchen receptacle. Counter plugs, you can branch off to another receptacle, maximum two. So basically, everything in your kitchen, you have your counter, you have your dishwasher, you have your microwave, you have your hood fan. All these circuits required to have their own breaker. Um, um, Required to have their own breaker. You cannot overload anything. At the end of the job, you would have to pass inspection. And if the inspector comes and he turns this breaker on and he sees that you're powering up more than um, more than 3 devices, then you're not going to pass that inspection. You're going to have to fix it. It's going to be a mess. You're going to have to cut drywall. You're going to have to run cable. So for that reason, I always plan ahead. I always do read. Well, I don't need to read the code book because I've been doing this so long. So for me, it's like coming into our house, looking, laying out my kitchen, and knowing that I need one circuit per each device in the kitchen. So for me, I don't have any problems, but for others, they will probably have problems. Okay. Um, as you can see here, I like to keep my panel neat. Okay. All my wires are neatly positioned. As you can see. Okay, I have my ground wire neatly positioned. Okay, and another thing is, let's get you up closer here. One switch on the breaker? No. So when it comes to your switch now, you can basically jump. You can basically they're called feeders. You call it. So I can basically put maybe 3 rooms of lights from a switch. I can jump to one switch, jump to the other kitchen switch, jump to the hallway switch, um, and I can feed it like that. So me personally, what I do is I always only I would say power up about 3 rooms per circuit, per lighting circuit. Meaning that if I have my washroom and I have, let's say, the kitchen, I will power up those 2 rooms together. Reason why I do that is because when it comes to, let's say, you lose power somewhere, you're not losing power throughout the house. You will still have power inside of your washroom, your second washroom maybe, your living room, your outside will still be powered. So I do not recommend to power up your kitchen, your your living room, your washroom, everything on the same circuit is not feasible because you will have problems because of the fans that draws a whole lot of power. Once the fans are turned on in the washroom and you have a lot of lights connected to that circuit, you will start to see flickering happening and stuff like that, a whole lot of funny stuff. So I don't recommend to ever, I mean, everyone is different. It's just the way I've been doing it throughout my career. It's the way I've learned it, and I've always stick to that principle, and I've never had any issues. So for that reason, I will only power up certain rooms with a lighting circuit, and if I have to pull maybe 2 lighting circuits, 3 lighting circuits per floor, I will do that because I know that I'm not going to have any issues after the job. The customer is not going to call me back and say, hey, my lights are not working, my lights keep flickering. So I avoid all of those problems pretty much. Okay, so here I have my neutrals. Okay, so basically what I'll do is I'll strip, okay, and I will tie these neutrals onto my bar. I try to keep my stuff neat. Big up one uncle. I try to keep my neutrals, okay? Just like that. I like to keep the panel clean, clean and nice, no problems. Um, Here, this is where I will place my breakers. As you can see, these are all 15 amp breakers, okay? 15 amp breakers. And there is a name. This is the round breaker actually. So this is a Siemens breaker. This is a Eaton panel. So I cannot use a Siemens panel inside of an Eaton breaker. It's not allowed. Um, why is it not allowed? If there's a fire of any sort that happens, then the homeowner is not covered. It becomes my responsibility. It comes back to me, and I do not want my insurance to ding me. So I always follow the rules. So this is a 15 amp breaker. It's an Eaton. It's an Eaton breaker. Okay, the panel is Eaton, so I have to use Eaton. Okay, So how do I install this breaker? I basically go like that, okay, and I push this breaker in. Very simple, okay. You do not want your breaker to be loose. When I say breaker being loose, you don't want your breaker to be like this, because then you don't have any power on your breaker and you'll have problems. So always try to have your breaker pushed in all the way. Make sure it's firm, make sure it's not slipping, okay. So again, the reason why I'm using these breakers is because at the end of the job, I do not have to spend more money on another special breaker, which is about $60. These are $15, maybe $12 a piece. So for me to use these breakers right now is better to use them while I'm doing the construction. Once the construction is done, I will use the regular breakers, which are called arc fault breakers. What is the importance of the numbers on the breakers? The number on the breaker is a 15 amp. So 15 amp. So if you see here, 15, a 15 amp breaker, I can only use this breaker on a 14 gauge wire. So 14 gauge wire. I can only use it on a 14 gauge wire, okay? I cannot use a 15 amp breaker on a 30 on a 10 tree. This is a 10 tree wire. It's used for the dryer. This is a lot thicker, so I cannot use a 10 tree wire on a 15 amp breaker. This wire here will basically go on a 30 amp breaker, 30 amp 2-pole. So basically 30 amp 2-pole breaker will be two of these breakers together with a marking of 30 amps. So all breakers have a marking, 20 amps, 15 amps, 30 amps, 40 amps. Up the mar, you have you have 60 amp breakers. You have, as you can see, this is a 100 amp breaker. This breaker will feed this entire panel. And also another good thing also is you cannot overload your panel. When I say overload, I mean you have to load your panel according to what circuits you have. So basically right here I have a 60 amp breaker. I have a 30 amp breaker. I cannot go into this panel right now and put a 40 amp. I cannot put another 30 amp because then my panel becomes overloaded. What do I mean by overloaded? Overloaded means that you can then run into problems with your panel tripping, maybe a fire hazard. In reality, you can only load your panel, I believe it's up to 80%. You cannot go no more than 80% of your load for your panel. So for that reason, this is why you see I have a lot of 14 gauge wires here. I have a lot of 14 gauge wires. I have a lot of 12 gauge wires which don't draw a whole lot. And I just have the one 30 amp and the one 60 amp. Okay, so I know that my panel is not overloaded. What is the highest number on the breaker? Okay, so the highest number on a regular breaker, you can get a breaker up to 100 amps, 200 amps. When I say 200 amps, I'm talking about the main compartment and not inside of here. Um, so if I have, for instance, if I have a 100 amp panel, I cannot put I cannot put a 100 amp breaker on this side because now this 100 amp panel is the main feeder. So I have to load this panel with other small breakers. Um, you can go up to, when you say what's the what is the highest number on the breaker. Um, I mean, you can get services as much as um, 800. It depends on what you're doing. But that there is basically when you get into commercial. When you get into commercial, then you will get a lot of bigger size breakers. But during inside of your homes and stuff, I would say the most that you will use is if I have, okay, for instance, if I have a 200 amp breaker here, I can load this panel here with another 100 amp breaker, which will be fine because in reality, a 200 amp breaker, a 200 amp service is going to give you um, about let's say it will double. It'll give you about maybe 300 amps of service of power in your house. 220. 220 is basically for your stove. It's actually, we call it 208. 208 is what we use in Canada. So 208 is basically two hots. So if you, meaning if you have, let's say, a two pole, um, a motor for instance, a pool, and you need to change that setting on the motor, then now your your 220, you can basically, what you will do is you will put these two wires here up, Brian. You'll put these two wires here on a 20 amp two pole breaker, and that will give you your 208. Okay, 208 is in three phase panels in the US. 208 is in, yeah, 208 is no, three phase. So a three phase panel is basically you can share neutrals with a three phase panel. I believe in the US you also will have it. So a 208 three phase, there's a three phase system and there's a single phase system. So this here is a single phase system I'm working with. A three phase system now is what you usually use in commercial, industrial. You'll use it in restaurants, you will use it in hotels, anything to do with buildings is when you will get into a three phase system. Um, Three phase system is better, more efficient, but I've used it on my last house that I worked on. The customer requested a three phase system. So that home was the first home that I've ever done with a three phase system. So basically, residential, yes, it's 120, 208. Um, but three phase system is a whole different ball game. You can share neutrals with a three phase system. When I say share neutrals, basically you have a set of you have a labeler on your panel, which is be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. Over here you will have 2, 4, 6, 8. So when you get into three phase systems now, basically what happens is you have red, black, and blue. So basically, how the three-phase system works will be, um, let's see, one, two, three will be red, black, and blue, red, black, blue, and then you have five, which will be red again. So basically, what you can do now is you can share a neutral with one and five. Um, sorry, red, black, blue, red, black, blue. One, two, three, five. Yes, so one and three you can share a neutral pretty much. So again, three-phase system is a whole different ball game. When you get into, you can do a whole lot with a three-phase system. That's where you save a lot of money when it comes to the three-phase system. But again, three-phase systems we don't do it usually. Normally, we don't work on three-phase systems in homes. It's a special requirement from Hydro. Hydro has to approve it, and it will cost a whole lot of money to do a three-phase system. So for instance, this home here, I have a 400 amp service, and a 400 amp service is not a three-phase system, it's a single-phase system. But what I did was I ran parallel runs, which is required by code. For parallel, anything to do with a 400 amp service, you have to run two parallel runs back to your outdoor meter into your main compartment, which is in the basement here. Um, so it requires you to run two parallel feeds in order to power up your home. It's a code requirement here. I'm pretty sure it's probably a code requirement in the USA. Um, I'm not 100% sure about the USA, but I know that whatever USA have over there, we have here. So it shouldn't be that much of a difference. Okay. Okay. So basically, so you see, as you can see, I have my plywood here. Um, it's much neater. Um, you can share neutral as long as the current carrying conductor are on different. Yes, you can share a neutral. Yes, so that's what I'm saying. You can share the neutral. Your USA because you have brown, orange, and yellow. So brown, orange, and yellow. I have used that on the commercial job here. Um, but you can share a neutral. Yes, that's why I say when you're sharing a neutral, um, your circuits have to match up in the panel. So you cannot share a neutral with one and two, or you cannot share a neutral with this side of the panel in commercial and go to this side of the panel. It's not, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't pass code. So anytime you're sharing a neutral, you have to stay on the same side that you started. Okay. Like I said, there's a color code, red, black, blue, that we go by here. Red, black, blue. That's when you get into your sharing of neutrals. But like I said, you mostly do that in commercial. I mean, you can share neutral in residential also, but why what's the sense of sharing a neutral in residential when you're going to start to trip a whole lot of stuff? So for that reason, I just pull my own neutrals to every device that I'm powering up. Meaning, if I'm if I have a washroom GFI, I do not share a neutral with a plug that's in the living room, because a plug that's in the living room, you're going to be using a TV, you're going to be using a whole lot of different stuff, and then you're going to get into start to trip your devices. They can be on different side of the panel, just not on the same phase. They can be on different side of the panel. I'm not sure about that. I know in Canada here, when we're sharing neutrals, um, like I said, I've worked in commercial, and it's my background, it's my field. I've done about 16 years in commercial, and I've always shared. If you look into, I don't know if you have a code book there. There should be a rule in the code book, but you don't share. I cannot, like I say, I cannot share a neutral on this side with this side. Okay, it doesn't work. Whatever neutral I'm sharing in commercial, it has to be on this side. So again, I'm not sure. Maybe that's how you guys do it there. I'm not sure. It can be on different side of the panel, just not on the same phase. Yeah, like I say again, I'm not 100% sure about that. The way we do it here is we share it on the same side. Um, why I know that is because that's the way I was taught. It's the way I was trained. Um, so again, I'm not sure about sharing a neutral on the other side of the panel. I've never done it. So okay, and like I said, so the reason why I have my plywood, I put my plywood so I can install my panel. I put my panel on the plywood. As you can see, I have my holes here. I have my holes coming out. It makes the panel neater. Okay. All my wires are labeled. Okay. Everything's labeled. And again, yeah. And this here will again will be my feeder cable. Okay. And yeah, so that's it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. Commercial, industrial, electrical interior. Maybe we just do things different. Yeah, it's possible that you guys do it different there, but like I said, for us here, I've always done it the other way. So I'm not 100% sure of how you guys do it in the States. But yeah, so again, thank you guys for tuning into my video. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my videos, and also leave a comment in the comment section. And thank you. Okay, how do I end this? Yes, I will definitely just stay tuned to my videos. Please subscribe to my channel, and yes, you can see my videos and stuff online. Fabian Electrical Services Inc. Obviously, it's my YouTube channel. So please don't forget to subscribe. Okay, how do I end this?